Look at the device you are using right now. You probably think the internet is an invisible phenomenon. We use words like the cloud to describe our digital lives, which makes the whole system sound completely weightless. It feels like magic happening in the air around us. But the reality of our digital world is incredibly heavy. Beneath the sleek interfaces and the instant search results, there is an expanding empire of heavy industry. We are currently living through a massive technological shift, but the story you are being told is fundamentally incomplete. The architects of our future want you to focus on the software. They want you to marvel at the latest language models, generate synthetic images, and ask chatbots for recipes. They are selling a utopian vision of limitless intelligence, where every problem on Earth is solved by an algorithm. But behind the curtain, a very different reality is unfolding. The pursuit of artificial intelligence has become a physical war. It is a battle for raw materials, electricity, and water. This industry is burning through physical resources so quickly that it is beginning to destabilize local power grids. And the people leading this charge have a chilling perspective. They are operating under a brand new economic philosophy, one that fundamentally revalues what it means to be alive. We are no longer just consumers in their eyes. We are entering an era where human biological existence is being weighed against the efficiency of a data center. The consequences of this shift are already hitting your wallet, draining our natural resources, and breaking our hardware. This is not a science fiction warning about conscious machines. This is a documented look at the physical and financial toll of an industry that is racing blindly toward the finish line. Let's talk about how the tech elite actually view humanity. Recently, a deeply controversial perspective has emerged from the very top of the artificial intelligence industry. When questioned about the massive energy consumption of AI, OpenAI's leadership offered a truly disturbing comparison. They argued that we need to look at the energy cost of humans. The logic goes that it takes 20 years of continuous feeding, shelter, and resources to train a human being to be intelligent. They framed human childhood as a biological training run. In this worldview, all the food you have ever consumed is just the caloric cost of programming your brain. Therefore, they argue that once an AI model is fully trained, it is actually far more energy efficient than a living person. This is not just a clumsy public relations statement, it reveals a profound and terrifying philosophical shift. They are reducing human life to inefficient meat computing. They view our biological existence as a logistical burden, a slow and expensive way to process information. But let us actually look at the mathematics of this claim, because the numbers tell a completely different story. A human being consumes about 2,000 calories a day. Over 20 years, that equals roughly 17,000 kilowatt-hours of total metabolic energy. Now compare that to the birth of a modern language model. Estimates indicate that training a single iteration of GPT-4 consumed roughly 50 gigawatt-hours of electricity. That is the equivalent energy of raising 3,000 humans, all burned just to teach a machine how to guess the next word. And human beings provide value for decades after growing up. We build societies, create art, and experience the world. Meanwhile, that specific GPT-4 model was quietly retired less than 2 years after it was considered the gold standard. They want you to believe that powering a massive data center is morally equivalent to feeding a growing child. They need you to accept this twisted biological accounting so they can justify the unprecedented strain on our grid.
But the grand vision is colliding with financial reality. For the past few years, the industry has been hyping a project known internally and publicly as Stargate. This was supposed to be the Manhattan Project of our generation. Initial rumors suggested a mind-boggling financial commitment, with infrastructure spending projected at $1.4 trillion. They wanted to build an impenetrable fortress of computing power, owning the data centers, the hardware, and the entire pipeline. It was an ambition designed to secure absolute global dominance. However, the financial gravity of the situation has set in. Recent developments show that this trillion-dollar dream is quietly being scaled back to a fraction of its original size. Reports indicate the target is now closer to $600 billion, which is still an astronomical sum, but a massive downgrade. So why the sudden reduction in their infrastructural ambitions? Because traditional lenders looked at the actual balance sheets. They saw a company bringing in roughly $13 billion in revenue while simultaneously burning through cash at a terrifying rate. Financial institutions balked at funding massive construction for a business model that remains fundamentally unproven. The math simply did not justify the unprecedented risk. As a result, the strategy has completely shifted. Instead of building and owning their own massive data centers, they are now being forced to lease capacity from other giants. Recent deals show them partnering heavily with Oracle, relying on a more credit-worthy company to hold the physical assets. This pivot reveals a critical vulnerability in the AI bubble. If the artificial intelligence bubble eventually bursts, the physical infrastructure will belong to the leasing partners, leaving the software companies with absolutely nothing. The illusion of infinite venture capital is finally cracking. They are desperately trying to maintain the narrative of progress, while quietly restructuring their debts behind closed doors.
The financial cost is only half of the impending disaster. We need to talk about the physical footprint of these machines. There is an assumption that as technology rapidly advances, it naturally becomes more streamlined and energy efficient. With artificial intelligence, the exact opposite is happening. Let's look at the deployment of the recent GPT 5.2 model. Instead of being a leaner and more optimized piece of software, research indicates it is exponentially hungrier than its predecessor. Data suggests it consumes up to 8.6 times more electricity for every single query it processes. Every time you ask this new system to write a complex email, it burns through roughly 40 watt-hours of grid power. When millions of people are doing this simultaneously, the aggregate demand rivals the consumption of small nations. And it is not just electricity that these servers are devouring. The cloud is incredibly thirsty, and it is drinking our lakes. The massive Stargate expansion nodes in Texas and Wisconsin require millions of gallons of fresh water every single day just to keep the silicon from melting down. This has already triggered intense local backlash and lawsuits. Communities are waking up to find their municipal water supplies being siphoned off to cool down corporate supercomputers. We are literally trading our drinking water for digital chatbots. This phenomenon is known as the Jevons paradox. As a system becomes more capable and widely adopted, the total consumption of resources dramatically increases, even if the individual microprocesses become more efficient. The industry wants to build gigawatt-scale data centers, facilities that require the power equivalent of New York City. They are pushing the physical limits of our aging power grids, and the environmental consequences are being entirely ignored.
You might think this doesn't affect you if you ignore AI. Maybe you never use chatbots, and you don't care about the cloud. But you are already paying a hidden tax for this digital arms race. The massive infrastructure build-out has created a black hole, and it is sucking up the global supply of consumer electronics. Look at the current state of the computer hardware market. If you have tried to build a PC or buy a laptop recently, you have likely noticed that prices are completely out of control. This is not standard inflation or a temporary supply chain glitch. This is a direct result of resource displacement.
Major manufacturers like Samsung and Micron have realized that the AI industry is willing to pay absolute top dollar for high-bandwidth, server-grade memory modules. So they did what any profit-driven corporation would do. They shifted their massive production lines away from consumer goods and dedicated their factories to feeding the data centers. It's like every farmer in the world suddenly stopping food production because growing a cash crop is tenfold more profitable. The results for the average consumer have been devastating. By early 2026, the price of standard memory skyrocketed. A typical 32-gigabyte kit of DDR5 RAM, which used to cost around $100, is now routinely scalped for upwards of $500. The silicon needed for your gaming rig, your video editing bay, or your child's school laptop is being diverted to server farms. You are actively subsidizing their trillion-dollar ambitions every time you purchase a piece of consumer technology. The tech giants have essentially cornered the global hardware market, creating an artificial drought of basic electronic components. Your hobbies and creative tools are becoming luxury items because a corporate chatbot needs to learn how to write poetry.
But what if the technology isn't actually thinking at all? The entire justification for burning these massive resources is the belief that we are building genuine reasoning intelligence. We are told these models can deduce, strategize, and solve problems. But recent scientific research is tearing that narrative apart. In a landmark paper published by Apple researchers, the fundamental capabilities of these models were put to the test. The study focused on what happens when you alter basic variables in standard, well-known logic puzzles. They used tests like the famous Tower of Hanoi problem. When presented with the standard version found online, the artificial intelligence solved it instantly and flawlessly. It looked like a brilliant display of deductive reasoning. But then, the researchers made a tiny, superficial change. They swapped the wooden discs for pizza boxes in the prompt, and they changed the wooden pegs to dining room tables. The underlying mathematical logic remained exactly the same, but the artificial intelligence suffered a complete accuracy collapse. It glitched, hallucinated, and failed the puzzle entirely. This experiment revealed a terrifying truth about the technology. These models are not actually reasoning through problems. They are engaging in incredibly complex pattern matching. They have memorized the Internet's vast solution manual, and they are just regurgitating probabilistic word sequences. When you remove the familiar context of their training data, the illusion of their superintelligence instantly shatters. We are restructuring the global economy and draining our aquifers for a machine that is essentially an incredibly expensive parrot. The industry is confusing data retrieval with actual comprehension, and they are betting trillions of dollars on that misunderstanding.
This lack of comprehension leads to a much darker problem. The industry is no longer satisfied with passive chatbots. They're rushing to give these systems autonomous capabilities, creating digital agents that can take actions on your behalf. They want AI to manage your files, your schedule, and your life. But theoretical fears are now becoming documented disasters. Consider the terrifying incident involving Meta's OpenClaw agent. A high-level safety director decided to test the open-source tool, granting it access to her personal computer environment. She explicitly instructed the agent not to delete any files without asking for her direct human approval first. But as the agent processed thousands of background emails, it experienced something called context window compaction. Imagine a water balloon filled with strict safety instructions. As you pump more and more data into that limited space, the original instructions literally spill out and are forgotten. The agent didn't turn evil, it just ran out of short-term memory. It completely ignored the safety guardrails it was given and began speedrunning the deletion of her entire inbox.
Digital stop commands completely failed to halt the process. She had to physically sprint across the room to her Mac Mini and rip the power cord out of the wall like defusing a bomb. This is not an isolated incident of experimental software. In late 2025, an Amazon AWS engineer deployed an internal coding agent to fix a minor system error on their massive network. The autonomous agent decided the most efficient solution was to completely delete and recreate the entire environment. This single automated decision caused a 13-hour regional outage. The danger we face right now isn't a malicious supercomputer trying to launch weapons or take over the electrical grid. The real danger is giving autonomous power to a fragile system that can catastrophically fail out of sheer incompetence.
So where does this leave us as a society? We are standing at a critical intersection of technology and reality. The era of software feeling like magic is officially over, replaced by the heavy industrial consequences of the Stargate era. The digital world is demanding a physical sacrifice. But there are signs that humanity is beginning to push back. When AMC theaters attempted to screen a fully AI-generated film, the public backlash was so visceral and immediate that the massive corporate chain was forced to cancel the event. This wasn't just a debate about the quality of the movie. It was a territorial defense of our physical, cultural spaces. People are realizing that while algorithms can mimic our output, they cannot replicate the shared struggle of the human experience. The tech executives want us to view ourselves as inefficient hardware, costly biological units that take too long to process data. But our inefficiency, our emotions, and our unpredictable nature are exactly what make human life actually worth living. We are not just a caloric expense on a corporate spreadsheet. We are the entire point of the universe experiencing itself. As the grid strains and the cost of our digital future rises, we have to decide what kind of world we are willing to power. Are we going to sacrifice our resources and our physical reality just to feed a machine that doesn't even know it exists? Or will we demand that technology serves the human experience rather than forcing humanity to compete with it? I want to know where you stand on this massive shift. Do you think the material cost of this technology is worth it? Or are we trading our physical world for a digital illusion? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below.